The Deep Space Observatory stood in eerie silence, perched on the edge of a remote mountain range. A beacon of scientific pursuit amidst the vast darkness, its blinking lights pulsed faintly under the watchful gaze of the endless night sky. Inside, the control room was dimly lit, the glow from monitors casting an otherworldly hue across the room. Dr. Oliver Hawthorne sat hunched over his console, his tired eyes scanning the continuous stream of data scrolling across the screen. It was another routine night, or so he thought, until something unusual caught his attention. A peculiar signal, faint but consistent, pulsed across his monitor. He leaned forward, adjusting the frequency filters, and his heartbeat quickened. "Lena, get over here," he called, his voice laced with urgency. Dr. Lena Kim, his research assistant and longtime colleague, shuffled over, holding a half-empty cup of coffee. "What is it?" she asked, rubbing her eyes. Oliver pointed at the screen, the strange wave pattern fluctuating in a rhythmic pattern. "Look at this. It's been repeating for the last 10 minutes. Something's out there." Lena squinted at the data, frowning. "It's too structured to be natural interference. We've ruled out satellites, right?" "Cross-checked twice," Oliver replied. "No known source. And it's coming from deep space, way beyond our system." Lena set her coffee down and tapped at the keyboard, isolating the frequency and amplifying it. A faint hum filled the room, a whisper-like sound that sent shivers down her spine. "Jesus, it almost sounds like breathing." Oliver swallowed hard. "It's not just noise. There's an underlying pattern, something intelligent." Lena looked at him, concern creeping into her features. "So, what do we do? Do we report it?" Oliver hesitated, his eyes never leaving the screen. "Not yet. Let's try and communicate." Lena's eyes widened. "You think it's listening? If it's sending a message, maybe it's expecting a response," Oliver reasoned, typing rapidly. He sent out a simple reply, binary code, translating to hello. They waited, the tension in the room thick enough to cut with a knife. Seconds dragged into minutes, then the signal pulsed again, stronger this time. The waveform had changed, responding in a mirrored pattern. The message was clear. "We see you." Lena's breath hitched. "Oliver, I don't like this." Oliver stared at the words, a mix of fascination and dread washing over him. "We're not alone." Suddenly, the overhead lights flickered, and a low hum reverberated through the observatory. Monitors glitched, displaying static for a brief moment before stabilizing. Lena backed away from the console. Did that just happen because of the signals?" Oliver's fingers hovered over the keyboard. "It's reacting to us." A burst of static came from the speakers, and the whispering grew louder. This time, it wasn't just random noise, it was forming syllables, fragments of something almost comprehensible. "We hear you." Lena covered her mouth, her eyes wide with fear. Oliver shut it down. "We shouldn't be listening." Oliver hesitated, the weight of discovery warring with the growing fear inside him. But before he could act, the observatory's security cameras flickered on their own, displaying the exterior grounds. Something moved at the edge of the perimeter, tall, indistinct shapes shifting in the darkness. "Oh, God," Lena whispered. "Something's out there." Oliver scrambled to shut down the system, but the monitors flashed erratically, the message on the screen changing. "Do not leave." The whispering grew louder, filling every inch of the observatory, crawling into their ears and wrapping around their thoughts. "Oliver," Lena screamed, yanking him away from the console. "We need to get out of here." As they ran toward the exit, the whispering seemed to follow, growing in intensity, almost pleading. "Stay. Listen." With a final push, they burst out into the cold night air. The desert stretched before them in eerie silence, but the oppressive weight of unseen eyes bore down upon them. Lena grabbed Oliver's arm. "We shouldn't have answered, Oliver. We shouldn't have listened." Outside the observatory, the wind howled across the empty landscape, kicking up swirls of dust under the moonlit sky. Lena and Oliver stood just beyond the facility's entrance, their breaths visible in the cool night air. Despite the vast openness around them, an overwhelming sense of confinement lingered in their minds. Oliver tightened his grip on his flashlight, scanning the horizon. "Nothing but desert for miles," he murmured, though his voice betrayed a deep unease. "But that signal. Lena, it's like it knows we're here." Lena shivered, hugging herself as she peered into the shadows cast by the observatory's floodlights. "I don't think it's just a signal anymore. Something's watching us, Ollie. I felt it back in there." They stood in silence for a moment, listening. The usual night sounds, chirping insects, the distant howl of a coyote, were absent. Instead, there was only the relentless wind and an eerie static crackling faintly from their portable radio. "We need to go back inside," Oliver said finally, his voice uncertain. "We have to analyze this further." Reluctantly, Lena nodded, and they stepped back into the observatory. The moment the heavy metal doors shut behind them, the whispering resumed, soft, insistent, like a breath on the back of their necks. The lights overhead flickered again, and Lena gripped Oliver's arm tightly. "What if it's already inside?" she whispered. Oliver swallowed hard, forcing himself to stay rational. "There's no proof of that. We're exhausted. Maybe our minds are playing tricks on us." He led her back to the control room, where the monitors continued to display cryptic data scrolling endlessly. The words they had seen earlier, "We see you," still flashed intermittently on the main screen. Lena approached cautiously, fingers hovering over the keyboard. "I'm going to shut it down," she said firmly. Oliver watched, hesitant. "Are you sure? What if we lose everything? This could be the biggest discovery of our careers." Lena shook her head. "Or the biggest mistake." She pressed a few keys, but the system didn't respond. The screen flickered, and a new message appeared. "Do not leave." Lena recoiled. "Ollie, it's talking to us." Suddenly, the lights dimmed, and the entire room filled with a deep vibration, as if the building itself was breathing. The whispering grew louder, forming words they could almost understand. A shape flickered on one of the monitors, a blurry silhouette, humanoid but indistinct, standing just outside the observatory doors. "It's here," Oliver whispered, his face drained of color. Lena's hands trembled as she reached for the emergency shutdown switch, but Oliver grabbed her wrist. "Wait. If it's already inside, shutting down won't stop it." Before Lena could argue, a piercing screech echoed through the observatory, and every screen flashed erratic patterns of light. The whispering turned into a single, chilling voice that spoke through the speakers. "Listen." Both of them froze, paralyzed by fear. "What do you want?" Oliver stammered, staring at the monitors as if expecting an answer. The voice returned, fainter now but more distinct. "We were here before. You called us back." Lena felt a deep chill crawl down her spine. "This isn't just a signal," she whispered. "It's a presence. Something that was here long before us." Oliver took a shaky step back. "Then we made a terrible mistake." He reached for Lena's hand. "We have to leave. Right now." They hurried down the corridor toward the exit, the whispering chasing them, echoing from the walls. As they reached the doors, they found them locked tight, unresponsive to the override codes. "We're trapped," Lena gasped. The whispering ceased abruptly, leaving a deafening silence. A moment later, the emergency lights flickered back to life, and the door panel blinked green. Without a second thought, they pushed through, stumbling into the night. As they looked back, the observatory stood quiet, the monitors inside flickering with one last message. "We are here." Oliver and Lena exchanged a panicked glance, their hearts pounding in unison. They knew, deep down, that they hadn't just found a signal. They had awoken something. The desert night stretched endlessly before them, but the sense of relief was fleeting. Oliver and Lena had made it out of the observatory, but their minds were still trapped by the whispers that echoed within. The wind howled through the dunes, carrying with it an eerie silence that weighed heavily on their chests. Lena wiped the sweat from her forehead, eyes darting toward the distant horizon. "We need to leave, Oliver. We need to report this." Oliver shook his head, his eyes locked on the observatory behind them. Its silhouette stood dark and foreboding, but the faint glow of the monitors flickered through the windows, as if something inside was still watching them. "What if it follows us?" he whispered. Lena grabbed his arm, her grip firm. "Then we run faster." They hurried toward their vehicle, their boots crunching against the dry gravel. As Lena fumbled with the keys, Oliver hesitated, glancing back. Something was off. The observatory seemed wrong. The angles distorted, the shadows moving unnaturally. "Lena, do you see that?" She turned, eyes widening as the building seemed to pulse, almost breathe. The whispering returned, louder now, seeping into their minds. "You cannot leave." Oliver clutched his head, staggering back. "It's inside us now. It's in our heads." Lena shoved him into the truck, starting the engine with shaking hands. The headlights pierced the darkness, illuminating the swirling dust in front of them. As they sped away, the whispers morphed into static, fading into the night. For a moment, they drove in silence, their ragged breathing the only sound. Lena kept her eyes on the road, her knuckles white against the steering wheel. "We're not going back, Oliver. Whatever this is, it's not for us." Oliver nodded slowly, but deep down, the questions gnawed at him. What had they discovered? What did it want? He glanced down at the monitor in the truck's dashboard, a faint glow still emanating from the observatory's data uplink. Suddenly, the signal reappeared. "We are here," Oliver gasped, staring at the screen. "Lena, it's still transmitting." Lena's grip tightened. "Then shut it off," she snapped. Oliver hesitated, his fingers hovering over the control panel. "What if we need to understand it? What if it's trying to tell us something important?" Lena's voice was strained with fear. "What if it's trying to take us?" Before Oliver could respond, the truck jerked violently. Something unseen hit the vehicle, sending it skidding sideways. Lena fought for control, and they came to a shuddering stop. In the distance, dark shapes loomed, flickering in and out of existence like shadows given form. "Get out!" Lena shouted, scrambling out of the vehicle. Oliver followed, stumbling onto the dirt road. The shapes were moving closer, their forms twisting unnaturally, whispering in voices that didn't belong to this world. "You called us." Lena grabbed Oliver's hand, pulling him toward the nearest hill. They ran, breathless, with the whispers chasing them like an invisible tide. At the top of the ridge, they collapsed, gasping for air. Oliver dared to look back. The shapes had stopped at the edge of the road, their outlines shimmering, watching. "Waiting." "They're not following us," Lena whispered.
"Why?"
Oliver's eyes locked onto the glowing observatory in the distance. "Because they don't need to." He looked at her, fear and awe in his expression. "Lena, we brought them here." Lena's breath hitched.
"No."
This was already here. "We just woke it up." The whispers faded into the wind, and for a moment, all was silent. But they both knew the truth. The void had seen them, and it would never forget. Oliver reached for his radio, his voice steady despite the terror. "We need to warn someone. The world needs to know what's coming." Lena stared into the vast darkness ahead. "And if it's already too late?" Oliver didn't answer. The static returned through the radio, and the last message echoed through the night. "We never left."